For us as queer people, comedy has always been a survival mechanism, and that's what camp was.
Toni Morrison here from GLAAD with my bestie, my sweet friend, ALOK. How are you, my stunning
Doing well.
friend?
Great to see you.
Well, let's get right into it. I want to talk biology. Tell me all about this comedy special of yours, and I want to get into the core of your comedy and a bit of the origin story, but I want to hear from your words what this special is and what it means to you.
Yeah, sure. So oftentimes when people discuss biology, they act as if it's like fixed and forever. So when they see trans people, they'll be like, you can't change biology. And one of the jokes in the show is anytime someone says that to me, I say, nice haircut. The truth is we're changing biology all the time. Biology is in constant motion, and so is life. And the point that I'm making in the show is that the real biology that's being erased isn't gender, it's the fact that we die. And when we remember that, then all of this time that's spent wasted hating other people becomes seen as the true comedy. So it's a kind of meta commentary on how, from the perspective of death, most of living is just stand-up comedy, because so many people are just wasting their precious time on Earth invested in hatred.
I know you might not be used to comic with this caliber of fashion sense. I figured if you were already all going to laugh at me outside, I might as well gather you in one place and charge you for it.
And I wrote this show because of the political climate facing trans people right now, where it felt like so often we were having to argue for the most basic things like existing. And that felt absurd. And I began to realize these times are so absurd. And when we treat them seriously, we're kind of legitimizing the absurdity. And so through comedy, what I'm able to do is to actually say, you think that I'm funny because of what I look like, but what's actually funny is how hundreds of millions of dollars are being funneled into non-issues rather than creating a better world for all people.
Yeah. And I love specifically how you are leveraging comedy to have a doorway into these conversations in such a way that's it's tough to say normalizing, that we have to normalize these conversations, but just knowing this side of you, this you very centering, calming, demure, if you will, and then to see your demeanor on stage. How do you activate that, and how are you able to speak on transness and biology in such a revealing way, in contrast to the realities that queer, non-binary, and trans people are facing right now?
I learned how to be flippant from my trans foremothers. It's really frustrating to me because when people think about comedy, they often think about like a white dude in jeans on a stage. But when I think about comedy, I think about the history of trans femmes and drag queens in our community. For us as queer people, comedy has always been a survival mechanism, and that's what camp was in its origin. Camp was a practice of saying, you're gonna disrespect me and might treat me badly, but I'm gonna find beauty in this. You're gonna throw me in the trash, but I found next season's accessories right here. Thank you so much. Camp is a process of living under extreme duress, but not being willing to compromise your delight. And so a lot of the way that I make comedy comes from the ways that I navigate the world as a trans person. So what that's done for me is now every time people are trying to oppress me because they can't, I'm like, thank you so much for more comedic material. That's what camp allows us to do, is to become so enormous that any attempt to bring us down actually is the joke.
Yeah, and it's always so incredible to me, for all great comics, including yourself, how you're able to not just include, but transmute that darkness, trauma, hurt behind that laughter.
Yeah, I don't think I'd be alive if I couldn't laugh, because then I would just be, I'm a water sign, so I'd be deep in my feels all the time, like, oh my God, why is this world so painful? But what comedy allows me to do is to laugh at myself like, oh my God, I'm a water sign. That sense of self-awareness kind of gets you out of the bender, gets you out of the spiral. And it's like, it's not that serious. It's not that serious. And genuinely, people have been asking me, like, what do we do when things feel so bad right now? I'm like, we cannot give up on humor. humorlessness is what loses any campaign for social change. And I think one of the issues that we found is that time and time again, LGBTQ folks are represented as humorless, as not being able to take a joke, as too politically correct, as too serious. And that's just not true to how we live our lives. We're always cracking jokes with each other. Well, that's one of my favorite parts about being queer, is that every queer party is decorated with laughter. I mean, some of the other decorations should go, but the laughter will stay.
One of the reviews I read called the special, quote, a celestial event. What do you make of hearing that about your special?
I mean, just, it rings very true. I've never felt more accurately represented. I think, it's unlike anything people have seen before, because what I'm trying to do in this show is weave comedy with poetry. And these are two things that often never come together and are seen as opposing. But that's so much of what I'm trying to do as an artist and as a trans person, is to say all of these binaries are holding us back. And in this show, there were versions of it where I didn't have the poems. And then I decided, I have to do this, because what I wanted to show is that the reason I need to laugh is because the world is so dark.
I want to know a little bit, how did comedy make its way into your life? Did you realize one day that you are funny? Was it being on stage? I want to kind of get a bit of the origin story of comedy specifically for you in your life.
Yeah, sure. I began as a poet, and I would be performing on stage. And then the issue is that I started to have more fun introducing the poems and riffing in between them and kind of making fun of myself writing the poem. Because my poems were so dark, I needed comedy as a way to sort of introduce, here's another dark poem, here's another dark poem. Yeah. And then I started having more fun riffing the comedy. So in the beginning, my shows would be 90% poetry, 10% comedy, but then it skewed in the opposite direction because I was just following what charmed me. And what I found is that my training as a poet helped me write comedy, because what is poetry but an intentional use of sound and space? And that's what comedy is too. So I often feel like I'm writing stanzas of comedy. I pay a lot of attention to which words I'm using, the pace with which I'm saying words, images I'm creating, metaphors. And in that way, I don't see comedy and poetry as distinct. They're actually kind of part of the same energy for me.
You also have a docu-short coming out, or is it out already?
So out is a complicated word for a documentary short, because we're out on the film circuit. So in that way, my film is it's closeted, and it's outing itself to trusted companions, but it hasn't yet taken the final leap to be visible to the world.
I love that. Well, at any rate, it's executive produced by Jodie Foster, directed by Alex Hedison. First of all, did you ever think you would be hearing those words?
No, and it's been really surreal to be doing press with Jodie and getting to know Jodie and Alex, and it's been an adventure. I had no idea how involved film campaigns are.
Yeah,
it's truly an amazing team effort, and I feel so lucky that we have such a great team on board.
Did you find that a documentary project commanded a certain uniqueness and vulnerability from you compared to other projects that you've done?
Yeah, totally. I think so much of my work is very poised, the glam is done, the lines are memorized, I'm on stage. And there's this distinction between the me that's a performer and the me in my own life. And what documentary required me to do is to kind of practice a new form of vulnerability on camera, to bring the camera into my most intimate worlds, worlds that I often speak about on stage but can't show you. So I did have a little nervousness of being is the camera really on when I just woke up? I look like a mess, I want to go get together, or I'm not in a chic outfit. But then I think that's part of the elegance of documentary, is you get to see people 360.
This conversation wouldn't be complete without mentioning that you are part of the advisory committee for GLAAD's social media safety program. And with an audience and the cultural impact that you have, the ear that you have across audiences, how are you keeping yourself sane on social media these days? And what are some words of wisdom from you on how to deal and cope with a lot of the online hate that is happening and, quite frankly, will continue to manifest?
Yeah, this work has been really important to me because a lot of people don't understand that a lot of the escalating culture of anti-LGBTQ discrimination is because of disinformation on social media. So people are being fed absolute falsehoods about our community and then going to polls with incorrect information about who we are. And social media corporations, by and large, have not taken a stand to regulate this because they stand to profit off of it. And unfortunately, hatred against our communities, especially as trans people, has become extremely lucrative in this world. And so knowing that not only is this violence happening, but people are profiting off of it is a really painful reality because there's no incentive structure to actually say, hey, you're not allowed to demean and dead name and disparage an already marginalized group online. What I would say is that it's important to step away. That's been hard for me because you go into fight or flight, you're like, oh my goodness, I'm under attack. But it's important to understand that like self-protective mechanisms need to be deployed. So over the past few months, I've not actually been online that much. And it's been so great for my mental health because as self-assured as I am as a trans person, no one can withstand reading thousands of really bitter and horrific comments about yourself. So when you peel away and you kind of touch grass, if you will, you remember that there's so much more to the world than what's being fed to you in an algorithm.
I do want to wrap up our conversation here by thinking about your aunt Ubashi, who passed in 2022. Oh my gosh, led the LGBTQ the task force for a number of years, among other organizations, through the AIDS epidemic. I mean, you literally have activism and freedom in your veins, and I know you know that. What would she think of this moment and think of this docu-short and this comedy special that you're releasing?
Yeah, you know, Orvishi had the boldest laugh in our family. It was so loud and raucous, and she loved to laugh so much. And that, I think, inspired me more than anything because I knew the pain that she had gone through. And even throughout her cancer treatments, she was still laughing and finding ways to party. She created this like lesbian hangout, like Les Hangout, I think. We both love puns. That became her kind of support network through her last few months. And what was so striking to me is that there was so much joy even in that. And I think that's what she would be saying to us right now is like, yes, we have to take stock of just how awful the world is, but we cannot lose our ability to laugh in the face of it.
Absolutely love that. Alok, thank you so much. Thank you for all of our conversations that we have and for lifting us up by just doing your thing and being out there. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.